we've got a special guest on the phone. Rob, what's his name and who is he?
His name is Daniel Payne. He is the CEO of Down Syndrome Victoria, a subject very dear to my heart. Daniel, good morning. Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show.
Good morning, Robert, and good morning, Neil. Thanks for having me on.
That's all right, Dan. And we should just preempt this by the fact that Dan and I used to work together.
Really?
He used to work for the same bank that I work for currently. Oh. And apart from being a really, really nice fellow, a really clever bloke, he's an Adelaide supporter.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, there is lots wrong
with that. A former South Australian myself, I understand why he would do that. There's nothing wrong with... Did you say Port Adelaide?
No, Adelaide.
Oh, that's not so good.
No, don't want to go the early crow. But, Dan, we're going to talk a bit about Down syndrome, but we're also going to talk about something that I think the expression, you are crazy, comes to mind. But let's deal with the serious stuff first. Down syndrome, what is it?
Yeah, so look, Down syndrome is a genetic condition. It's not an illness or a disease, and it's no one's fault. It is one of the more common forms of intellectual disability all around the world, and it occurs approximately in 1 in 1,200 to 1 in 1,500 births. That's
a very high proportion, isn't it? You wouldn't have thought it was that high.
Yeah, and look, the other compelling part to that, Neil, is the research has varied. However, we do know that it's somewhere between 90 and 98% of pregnancies are terminated when there's been a chance or a higher chance pregnancy of having a child with Down syndrome or screening.
So I guess with modern medicine, the ability to do that screening would be far greater. But of course, it creates a real problem for parents in that that difficult decision of termination. Because I know from first-hand experience, the disability, the Down syndrome, intellectual disability, is not actually that big.
Yeah, and Robert, and that's, as an organisation, what may become as a surprise to some people, we're not pro-life, but we're definitely pro-information. And what I mean by that is, even still today, we've had too many people reaching out that have been handed an abortion brochure at that time of the screening, as opposed to what it means to also have Down syndrome. So whilst that gap continues to exist, and I never want to have another parent contact me, which has occurred over my 5 years at DSV many times, of those that have regretted their decision, if only they knew more about what it meant to have Down syndrome. So the advocacy work and the push for funding, it's real, and I'm very fortunate. I've got 3 children. I've got twin girls, Abby and Holly, who are 14, and Holly has Down syndrome, and then a young fella, Tyson, who's 11. Holly's been one of the most incredible things to happen to our lives. I knew she would change my life. I never knew she'd change my job. As much as I enjoyed working with Neil 5 years ago, I do sit here today and say I've got the best job in the world, working alongside and for people with Down syndrome.
I'm staggered by the fact that she's 14, that your kids are 14 and 11. That makes me feel really old all of a sudden. I can remember they were at 5.
Lots of attitude in the household, Neil, at the moment. But
I can imagine there would be, and that's just from your wife. So, obviously you have started running the organisation, but I went to the website Rob. It's a word Rob's not all that familiar with. I was doing some research during the week and noticed that a lot of the people on your team at DSV have in fact got Down syndrome.
Yeah, look, as we sit here today, we have 9 employees with Down syndrome in a breadth of roles. A large portion of my employees who have Down syndrome form part of our advisory network. So there were 6 employees on there. And we formed the advisory network probably 4 years ago now. And it was quite tricky. It was as COVID was well and truly away, and onboarding 6 adults with Down syndrome virtually, and not necessarily having the supports in place that we wanted to, but it was not a reason to kick ahead. And so we did, and I'm so thankful that we have the individuals, the development growth of those individuals has just been absolutely extraordinary, but their impact is now well beyond Down Syndrome Victoria, and many organisation and partner groups and contributions to government policies and procedures. It's even exceeded my expectations of what that could have been in those early days. So, and then beyond that, we've had Steph, who's worked at Down Syndrome Victoria for over 25 years. So I've said to Steph, that is a record that I don't think anyone else will be beating in our organisation's history. And then we have another staff member that works as part of our peer support program as parents, with parents of a child of any disability, and she works at a play lead at one of those centres.
Daniel, I was delighted when Neil told me you were going to be the guest this morning, because this subject's very dear to my heart. It was extremely life-changing for me to go to work at Kooringal in Geelong about 25 years ago and meet several people in our crew that had Down syndrome, and it completely changed my life in the sense that I've got to admit that as a youngster I was somewhat fearful of people with disability, and I mean that sincerely. I did not know how to engage, and therefore didn't, just deliberately avoid it to the point of being embarrassing at times. Being at Kooringal was life-changing in the sense that you do find out firsthand that, as I mentioned before, the disability is actually very minimal when you go deep down into getting to know people with Down syndrome. There's not a lot of difference, and if you work through developing a relationship, it is actually quite rewarding, fulfilling, and life-changing to be part of a Down syndrome life.
Yeah, and Rob, that's not an uncommon story, and that is where creating opportunities for community participation and exposure for the general public, more so than people with a disability, is absolutely critical, because we know when people, and I'll talk specifically to people with Down syndrome, but there's definitely a theme more broadly for people with a disability. When people with Down syndrome are included in community activities, be it school, be it local sporting clubs, and we'll talk about employment in a moment, but it's so important for the person with Down syndrome, but I can guarantee people within those settings get as much out of that experience. And I personal experience with Holly at school, particularly within primary school. Holly completely changed the perception of people with disability at that school, and the school were absolutely terrific. They may not have had a whole heap of experience of children with Down syndrome prior to Holly starting, but my goodness, did they come a long way whilst Holly was there.
And sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, with employment, that's the real big one for us, because it's one thing. When I started in this role, I remember being invited to a health setting to talk about Down syndrome, and I went and spoke, and I walked away from there. It was my first few weeks, and I said, I'm never ever doing that again. Like, who am I, a middle-aged bald man, talking about Down syndrome versus the opportunity for somebody with Down syndrome to go and talk about what it means to have Down syndrome and what adjustments can be made. And so that was one significant push for the advisory network. But then an additional step to that, it's one thing to hear somebody with Down syndrome talk about their experience, and you'll remember that if you were working alongside that person on a regular basis, I can guarantee that actually changes not only your life, but it changes the way these organisations operate and how inclusive they are, and that's our big push. And over the last, we had some seed funding from one of our federal government grants, and within that we managed to place almost 20 people in mainstream employment, and each of those employers are now partners of DSV or stay connected with us because the value add, and some of those employers are coming back and looking to employ more people with disability, which that's the ultimate goal.
What I was going to say, though, earlier, when I was going through school, which was obviously not as long ago, it was a lot longer ago than you, and nowhere near as long ago as what it was for Rob, kids with Down syndrome were never in our class because they were sent off to a different educational environment with the terribly named special school. These days, with kids with all sorts of disabilities being included in the classroom, that enrichment of the experience for everybody is obviously going to help.
Absolutely, and there's a generational part here, Neil, as you've just said. And so people with Down syndrome, the experience that they're having, it's still not all smooth sailing, absolutely not, but it's comparative to those that come before them 20, 30 years ago or 40 years ago, it's completely different. And one of the biggest changes in our organisation's history, so DSV has been around for 46 years now, and it was founded by a group of very courageous parents who decided to bring their child home from hospital as opposed to send their child to an institution, which was the standard pathway, of course, back then. And the average life expectancy of somebody with Down syndrome was 19 when we were founded, whereas today it's mid-60s. And there's a whole plethora of reasons as why. And yes, there's medical advances, but one of the key ones is actually access to medical. And so if you were to have a child with Down syndrome today, there's a fair chance that screening may have been done, and so you'll have, not everyone will obviously proceed with that screening, but if they did, they'll have there's a high chance of understanding whether your child's going to have Down syndrome or not. Things can be put in place and preparations, particularly we know heart defects are something that is reasonably common across our community, not for all. So we've been very fortunate with Holly. Holly's never had a heart issue at all. But the hospital was ready for that. And so if Holly was born with a hole in the heart or any challenges there, that there was a team ready to go. Whereas 46 years ago, that child was put into an institution and not given that chance.
Daniel, there's a lot of requests for public funding to support organisations like this with people with all sorts of different disabilities and health issues. And you often wonder when the money's going to researchers what's actually happening. But this is a really good example of clearly people's generosity has helped the organisation do genuine research, because that is an astonishing change, obviously across the world with the research. But to change that life expectancy by 200% is quite amazing.
Yeah, and that's why there's so many reasons behind that. And I don't think we can underestimate the value of full inclusion just in people's lives. I'll never forget the story when I started that I met somebody that was working in the disability sector that on their weekends used to go to an institution and take people with Down syndrome out for the night or the day and night. And that was absolutely, you weren't allowed to do that. And that person here, 45, 50 years later, still working in the sector. And hearing her story of what she now does and supports people with disability comparative to those days, which is scary to think that it's in some of our lifetimes. I'm not going to give you an age away there, Neil, but yeah, in one sense it's incredible. The other part, it's scary to think that was not that long ago.
Quite amazing.
Yeah, so we are going to talk about something that you did last week, and we're going to try and stump up a few bucks for you. I have my donation ready to go. So what did you do last weekend that would drive most people nuts?
Well, I may not have thought it through that well at the time, Neil. It was only 8 weeks ago. We had there was a couple of things at play. One, our federal funding, we knew that was going to be significantly cut. At that time, there was going to be no extensions of our projects and grants, which we had over $500,000 of federal funding that was going to stop as of the 30th of June. We have received verbal confirmation that there's going to be an extension of some of that, but it's still going to be cut over in half. And we've got no state disability or health funding going into next year. So that leaves an enormous hole in our budget. But the one thing that we were not prepared to reduce our core and foundational support. So that's just not an option, because at a time when more people with Down syndrome and families we're supporting them than we ever have in our 46-year history. So it's a tricky spot. And the fundraiser that I come up with eight weeks ago is certainly not going to fully close that gap. But I couldn't sit on my hands and do nothing, Neil. So
you can't sit on your hands now.
No, I can't. So I come up with the idea in the middle of the night, actually. I woke up in the morning, and the idea was around, I wonder if there'd be any interest if I sat up on the second hole at Wood End Golf Course and just kept hitting balls until I had a hole in one. And I woke up in the morning, called a good friend of mine, Chris, at Drum and Golf Nidri, and just gave him the idea and concept. And he said, here's $2,500 worth of clubs to put up as a prize. Followed it up with a call to the Wood End Golf Club, and the board up there were just amazing. And that I've been a member at Wood End my entire life, and that's like a second family up there. So it didn't surprise me that they got behind the concept. However, it was going to do some damage to their course in coming up to winter. So to have them fully on board, and then breached it with Lucy, our communications manager at DSV, who, Lucy, I'm sure won't mind me saying, has no interest in sport at all. But when I seen that even Lucy was interested in it, I thought there might be something in this, and it went from there.
So did you get a hole in one?
I did. It took me 903 balls, Neil. So the concept was I was staying up at Wood End Golf Club from Saturday morning until I had hit 3,000 balls day and night, or have a hole in one trying. So I was lucky that on the Sunday that I was fortunate to have that hole in one on ball 903.
It would have been really an anticlimax if you had got it in first hit.
What was interesting, that it was live streamed, and we actually didn't think the live stream, the main purpose of the live stream was just so we could have it recorded, because there was two concepts. There was me hitting up to 3,000 balls over 4 or 5 days, or anybody could come up to the club and for $10 have a go themselves. And so we had two separate prizes. And so we were fortunate. We had over 250 people turn up over the weekend in support and have a go, which was just amazing. But the second shot that I hit it to half an inch. We thought it was in. It would have been a lot of disappointed people, except for myself probably. But
let's put things in context. Daniel, what's your handicap?
I do play off scratch.
What?
But anyone...
God, I hate people like you.
Yeah, the holy ones just don't happen. And I've had a few over the journey, Rob, but I have to admit I was very much doubting myself after 775 shots.
Well, this is interesting, and I don't want to discredit the skill of golf, but obviously your intent is when you get up to the tee on a par 3, you want to put the thing in there. That's all golfers desire. So if you're playing off scratch, you're pretty handy at golf, clearly, and you've had 903 goes to get to it. It just does show there is a little bit of luck in this game.
Oh, there's a lot. I hit the flag and the hole at least 7 or 8 times. And the support crew that I had up there, the volunteers, my brother and a lot of members from the Wood End Golf Club, my dad, my son was up there. The agony that they showed, because where I was hitting from, we had a TV screen that had the stream so I could see the hole, because you can't, because it's uphill, you can't see it yourself. And it was just on a slight delay. So I'd hear the screaming up on the green before I actually seen what was happening. And there was a lot of rolling on the ground up there every time I got close. And what was the funniest part was a Saturday night, because we had some night golf balls, which looked absolutely incredible on the stream. And we weren't thinking anyone was going to dial in, but we had hundreds and hundreds of people following that, and it was just incredible. And I had my phone connected to the music that was playing, and when I hit the hole, just for the next 2 minutes, my phone was bipping, so the music went off. So there was a lot of people paying interest, and something that we didn't think of at the time, which I'm sure being on radio, both of you would be aware, because I had music playing in the background that first day. YouTube took that video down pretty good.
Yes, they do that, don't they?
Just for a bit of entertainment with yourself, did you change clubs?
No, you stayed at Wood End the whole time.
Yeah, well played, Neil.
Thank you.
But I started with a pitching wedge, but as I got so tired, I ended up holing out with a 7-iron. That's how exhausted.
That's the point I was going to make. Was, did it get to the stage where I haven't got it in yet? I'll just try a soft 7-iron rather than trying to belt a 9 or a wedge, whatever the case may be. So yeah, that's interesting, and that probably helps you get home.
Easy. It wasn't an easy swing, Rob, to be honest.
I spoke to him on Monday. He couldn't move. Now, if you want to donate money, you're still receiving it. By the way, he went for a target of 30 grand. And he's got 41,600. And a little bit more now, because I've just put my donation through. Donate, folks, if you would. Please go to downsyndrome.org.au, downsyndrome.org.au. If you scroll down, there's photos of Dan, which is probably not something you want to show your children, but get on there. Donate. Oh, he's an attractive man. Don't worry about that, Rob. Please donate as much as you can, because the other thing, of course, is tomorrow is the end of the financial year, and it will be tax deductible. Woohoo! How's that for timing?
No, that was also part of the...
Not that anyone would take advantage of that, of course. No, they would be donated for all the right reasons. Dan, you're a superstar, good bloke, and got your heart in the right place, doing good things for the Down syndrome community. Thanks for being part of the show, and look forward to catching up for a beer soon.
Neil, thank you very much. I really appreciate the support. And jump on the Down Syndrome Victoria Facebook site as well. There's plenty of footage in there, all the agony and the ecstasy when it happened. And
the slight, if you don't mind me saying so, slight overreaction for getting it in when, after all, you were 900 over par.
There's a few birdies in there, Neil.
Fair enough. All right, enjoy your day.
See you, mate.
Thank you both. Bye.
There he is. That is Daniel Payne, the CEO of Down Syndrome.